Hello everyone and welcome to Momentum channel. My name is Mo, and in this video I want to share with you some of my favorite finance and investing books and what have been some of my key takeaways from these books. I also want to provide you a walkthrough of our investment portfolio that we have with Blossom. We're tracking our portfolio entirely through the Blossom app for free, currently sitting at just shy of $647,000. Before we dive into the video though, if you have not already checked out Blossom, you definitely want to do so. It's as I mentioned, it's an app that you can download for free using the referral link that I provided in the video description. Blossom is an amazing community of investors here in Canada and the US that share their portfolios. You can track their portfolio as it happens, any of their stock buys or sells. Plus, through this community, you can ask your questions and interact with so many other amazing investors out there and engage with them, learn from them, as well as, ask some questions that perhaps matters to you. With that out of the way, why don't we get into this video? So recently, my last post on Blossom was about this topic of my favorite finance and money books. So I thought it's actually quite relevant if I put this into a video whereby I can talk a little bit more about why I've selected these 6 books as my all-time favorite money, finance, and investing books, and what has been some of my key takeaways. And in fact, the idea from this video came from a question that I got from the comments. This has been quite a popular post on Blossom. You see there have been overall quite a number of likes and comments on it. And the question in there was, what have been my one-liner takeaway? And that really made me think. Even though I responded to the question in the comments, I thought it could be actually a very fitting topic for a video whereby I can elaborate on it more. You see the names of the books here. I'm going to show you and go through them one by one. The first one I would say is I Will Teach You to Be Rich, in no particular order. All of them are interesting books, and I am really interested in them. But given the order of the images, I Will Teach You to Be Rich was a book by Ramit Sethi. Now, with Ramit Sethi, I got to know him a little bit more through the podcast. I listened to him. He has his famous podcast called I Will Teach You to Be Rich. On top of that, he recently, I would say about a year ago, or maybe a little bit over a year ago, he also had a Netflix series almost with the same name title. So all of that made me to kind of get to know him a little better. As I listened to his podcast in particular, I really got interested in his approaches and his thought processes. He talks a lot about the conscious spending plan. So when it comes to this book, when I borrowed it from library and actually read it, the few things that really stood out for me, I think the most important one was the importance of developing a conscious spending plan. And he actually shares that conscious spending plan for free that you can download and really plug in your number, which is something that I did. I actually used it for our household, for my wife and I. And then based on that, it really helps you identify and clarify what some of your values are when it comes to money, financial goals, and financial settings. At the end of the day, when I listen to a lot of Ramit's podcasts, the sense that I get from him is that it's okay to spend money. It's good to pursue financial independence, but it's also okay to spend money. You don't want to just become too much of a frugal person that barely even spends any money. Rather you spend money on the things that matters to you, what your values are, what actually truly brings you joy. Those things he's totally comfortable with, and encouraging people to actually spend money on. The other book that I like is actually by Morgan Housel, The Psychology of Money. And now I listened to Morgan Housel on a few podcasts as well. He was an invited guest on them, and I really liked his approach to the behavioral psychology around money and how you can approach finances. It's not just a matter of mathematical decision, but a lot of it is psychological. A lot of it is around your behavioral decisions that you make and how you approach those tough decisions. Like, for example, imagine you're investing in the stock market. You see that suddenly the stock market is down for a few days in a row. How are you going to react to it? Are you going to panic, or are you going to stay the course? All of that, if you think about it, it has to do with your emotions, keeping your emotions in check and making those decisions not in a rushed manner. This is absolutely one of the must-read books, I would say, or perhaps must-listen books. I believe I listened to the audiobook of The Psychology of Money, and I absolutely loved it. Key takeaway for me is that managing your emotional impulses and learning how to behave in face of challenges when it comes to money decisions is going to play a crucial role in your financial success. Definitely highly recommend that. I also recently found out that Morgan Housel does have his own set of podcasts, and his podcast episodes are actually quite short. I would say mostly 10 to 15 minutes each episode. Really encourage that. through the comments, some folks were recommending Morgan House's recent books. I think he has a recent book as well published. I haven't checked that out yet, but definitely something that I'm going to keep an eye on. And if I can get my hands on it, I will definitely would like to read his latest book as well. Next book is 𝗖𝐋𝐈𝖖. And I think you're starting to see some pattern, because 𝗖𝐋𝐈𝖖 is also a book from some folks that I love their podcast. There's a podcast with the same name called 𝗖𝐋𝐈𝖖. Jonathan and Brett have been amazing kind of co-founders and hosts of that for many years. As the name suggests, it talks about financial independence, the importance of financial independence, why you want to pursue it, and how you can actually get started. They have amazing guests on the show. Definitely highly recommend you to check out their podcast. As a result of that, I decided, I want to pick up the book. I actually borrowed this book from library, the hard copy of it, and then read through it. Really enjoyed it. A lot of the contents of it are geared towards, obviously, American audience, because the authors are American, but the generic concepts behind it are actually applicable regardless. Like, for example, in the US, you might talk about accounts like Roth IRA or things of that nature. But here we have its own equivalencies in Canada. And I assume if you're from another country, you still might have similar concepts and similar type of accounts. So looking beyond those account specific points, the concepts and the message behind these books are very relevant. For 𝗖𝐋𝐈𝖖, what I gathered from it, and the key takeaway for me, was that achieving financial independence requires a plan, much like building a house. Just imagine, if you're wanting to build a house, you need a blueprint, something that the house can be built upon. It needs to have its own foundations, and based on each components of the house plays a part. Like, you need to have proper windows, proper doors, proper maps, proper plan, and you first perhaps need to dig the foundation, build the foundation, and then only start, for example, doing the drywalls. You can't do it in another order. And same goes with when it comes to financial independence. You have to set your foundations right. Things like, making sure you don't have bad debts, or you manage your debts, and then from there on you build right habits, and so on and so forth. The other piece that I got from this book is that financial independence is not one size fits all. Here, even on Blossom or on social media, you see folks that are in different kind of stages of their pursuit of financial independence. Some have already reached it, some are very close to it, and some haven't even started. But even that, people have different lives, and people have different type of circumstances. My expenses may be very different from your expenses, and my life circumstance may be very different from others that I interact with on Blossom or other apps. I just want you to keep that in mind, and don't try to necessarily compare yourself to others. Use those comparisons, or use those type of posts, I would say, as more of a motivation for you to get started, and use that as an accelerator of your journey, as opposed to like something that may discourage you, because that's not in the intention whatsoever of sharing these experiences on these platforms. Next book is The Simple Path to Wealth. Now, to me, if I were to pick one book out of these 6 that I would say highly recommend, and probably I would say must read before anything else, I would say The Simple Path to Wealth. In fact, it's one of the most iconic books besides Rich Dad Poor Dad. The Simple Path to Wealth is by J.L. Collins, and he's known in the world of financial independence, as one of the most knowledgeable folks in this domain. And the person that actually, a lot of his writings, in this case, The Simple Path to Wealth, is partly his recommendations to his own daughter. He wanted to kind of share his own wisdom to his own daughter, and to guide her how she can also be on her way to setting up her life for success through reaching financial independence, simply by investing in index funds. J.L. Collins is all about investing simply through maybe a handful, or not even a handful, probably even a couple of maximum index funds that are globally diversified, broad-based market index funds, and low cost. He talks about that in multiple episodes of podcasts that he's been invited to. You can definitely check that out, or get a copy of the book. I think you're not going to regret it, especially for those who are interested in passive investing, or perhaps are hesitant about passive investing and want to get a different perspective on it. I think this book is going to open your horizons and open your minds. Rich Dad Poor Dad, I think, doesn't require a ton of introduction. The book has been around for years, and Robert Kiyosaki, I think, is also one that has quite strong opinions on different matters, but definitely is an iconic book, I would say. The part that really stood out for me from this book is the importance of trying to put your money in assets and, investing in things that add value to you, the grow in value over time, as opposed to putting your money into liabilities or debts. So use your money to acquire assets instead of liabilities. Pretty much, I would say there's a summary of that book for me. And lastly, Quit Like a Millionaire. This is a book by Christy and Bryce, a young Canadian couple who I believe right now live overseas. I have watched a lot of interviews from them on YouTube, listened to their several invited podcasts that they were on, and then decided to pick up their book. Now, there are concepts in the book that I don't necessarily 100% agree with it. So, for example, they are a little bit more hesitant, or perhaps not the most, in favor of acquiring a home. Now, granted, they are not saying that just as a pure statement. They talk about it depends on circumstances, where you live, and the cost of housing and whatnot. So, and maybe that's why probably initially I was a little bit hesitant, because where I live in a province that, the cost of housing is not, for example, as bad as some other provinces, like, for example, Ontario or whatnot. But even that, I am not trying to generalize saying that, oh, housing or buying a house is bad. That probably dropped me off the wrong way. But other than that, I think there's a lot of nuggets in this book that you might find valuable. The part that stood out for me the most regarding this book, essentially the Quit Like a Millionaire, I would say the fact that you want to spend your money on experiences that really last you a lifetime, as opposed to, say, just material stuff and consumer debt. And I think that's really one of the gist of this book. And I tend to agree. I think when I think about it, when I reflect back on the last year or the previous years, the highlights of the year are usually the times where I was spending time on or money on experiences. Those are the one that comes to my mind the first. It rarely is about, let's say, oh, I spent this much money to buy this item or this product. It's not, or this clothes. It's not really like that. That said, I don't want to also generalize still. Going back to 𝗖𝐋𝐈𝖖𝐊 book, like it boils down to your own values. If for you, maybe you value a lot your appearance and, let's say, your clothing, and you really get a lot of joy out of it, that's okay, as long as it's part of your conscious spending plan and you have it's almost like your guilt-free spending, as again 𝗖𝐋𝐈𝖖𝐊 pointed out. I think these 6 books go very much nicely hand in hand and allows you to get a really interesting perspectives to finances, investing, and managing money. Now, with that out of the way, I want to quickly also walk you through the portfolio. I know a lot of folks might be interested what I'm investing in. And now that I've read all of these 6 books that I talked about, am I taking some of those lessons and applying it? And I would say yes. And I think the proof of it is the fact that my wife and I, and this portfolio I'm showing here shows you the entire portfolio of my wife and I combined, is actually based on 3 simple ETFs. And one of them is, I would say, over 90% of our portfolio, which is 𝗖𝐋𝐈𝐿. So 𝗖𝐋𝐈𝐿 is iShares Core Equity Portfolio. It hasn't been incepted for that long, less than 5 years. I believe when it comes to August of 2024, it just hits that 5-year mark. But for now, as you can see, the past 1 year, at the time of making this video, is up by 18%. The past 5 year, like I said, it's less than 5 year, but it's, let's say, close to, I would say, 4.5 to a little bit more than 4.5 years, is up by 46%. With this portfolio, what is unique about it, I think, is the fact that it's considered an all-in-one ETF, which means by owning the shares of 𝗖𝐋𝐈𝐿 here in Canada, I'm already getting exposure to the entire world stock market, including exposure to Canadian markets, US market, emerging markets, as well as international markets. Now, with different percentages, the highest exposure is to US market, I believe closer to that 40-ish or so percent. Don't quote me exactly on the numbers. On the Canada side, it's closer to that 23% or so. International markets close to that same range of 20 to 25%. Emerging markets is a smaller portion, I believe closer to that 3 to 5%, if I'm not mistaken. That's the range that you're getting exposure to. And it does still pay you a modest dividend. With 𝗖𝐋𝐈𝐿, the focus is not on dividends. And for me, that's actually very much aligns with my approach. I'm still in the years that I'm pursuing FI, financial independence. I don't really need the dividend. And majority of my investments, actually, our investments are in non-registered account, close to half of our investment. So the fact that if we receive dividends, we have to pay taxes on it anyways, it's not really something that we really need right now. That's why we rather have investments in funds such as 𝗖𝐋𝐈𝐿 that do not have the highest dividend amount anyways. We care more so around the total return and total kind of return that these funds provide to us over the long period of time. Now, with 𝗖𝐋𝐈𝖖, as you see, we have in total 19,510 shares. We're getting so close to that, reaching that milestone of 20,000 shares of this. The total value invested for it with the gains of it. And let me actually switch to total gains, so it just gives you a better picture of where things are at in this portfolio. It's up by 12.6% or close to 66,000 in unrealized gain right now. Our next big holding is VTI and then VT. VTI and VT, my wife and I are holding these shares in our RSP accounts. If you're a new investor just getting started, honestly, I think as long as you're comfortable with getting a diversified investment approach in the overall stock market without the need to complicate your accounts, if you're comfortable with having 100% exposure to stocks, I would say 𝗖𝐋𝐈𝖖 alone is sufficient. It has a very low fee. The fee for MER for 𝗖𝐋𝐈𝖖 is only at 0.20%. So 0.20, not even 1%, 1/5 of a percentage point. So that's, I would say, amazing. The reason my wife and I, we decided that we are going to add VT and VTI in our RSP account is that we wanted to minimize the impact of withholding tax. Now, you have to do a lot of math behind the scene. Is it worth it? Because we have these shares in our Wealthsimple account, and in order for us to buy them, we had to first convert our Canadian dollars to US dollars, pay a 1.5% conversion fee. If we did the math, the VT and VTI have lower MER, and if we don't touch them for a long period of time, so let's say the next 10 years or so, at that point, it might really be worth it. But I would say if you're just starting out, you don't need to really bother yourself with a lot of those things. I think just holding on shares of 𝗖𝐋𝐈𝖖, as in our example, would have been sufficient too. Now, VTI, for those who are interested, is the Vanguard product, Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund. With VTI, you're getting 100% exposure to the US stock market. Whereas with VT, you're getting 100% exposure, again, globally to the stocks. Its VT is almost equivalent of 𝗖𝐋𝐈𝖖, but in US dollars. Well, there you have it, folks. A quick look into our portfolio consisting of 3 major funds, ETF investing, and my perspectives and reflections on those 6 financial investing money books that I highly encourage and recommend, and what I learned from them as my key takeaways. I hope you found this video beneficial and gained something of value from it. If you are interested in investing in ETFs, I have already put together a robust video focusing on the ultimate guide to ETF investing here in Canada. Definitely check that out. I will add the link in the video description. And I do encourage you to subscribe to my channel on YouTube. I put a lot of time and effort to bring forward to you a lot of value when it comes to investing passively in the market, as well as ways to reach financial independence and financial freedom. Thank you, and I hope to see you all next time.